Germany in September will choose a new leader, and that leader will obviously then in fall, at the end of the year, visit the White House, visit Joe Biden. And who will it be? All the parties have now decided who is going to be their candidate for the chancellery, and we will talk about that. But also in this edition of the Logbook, I want to talk about the topics that are on the voters' minds as we head into the super election year. That is, of course, the pandemic, but also the fallout of the pandemic. So the financial burden and the economic recovery. And last but not least, it is climate change and how to combat climate change. Guten Tag, I'm Knut, and I'm the representative of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in the United States and Canada. I am from the northern coast of Germany, but I've spent years in North America working on transatlantic politics. And this is my logbook. Fighting the pandemic will be a very important issue in the German elections. Maybe it will be the topic. While in the US, vaccinations are rolling out quickly, in Germany this is not the case. The COVID response in Germany was very strong, but there have been problems lately, and Germany is currently struggling possibly with a third wave of the pandemic. The vaccinations are finally picking up because Germany expanded its whole vaccination process. But because of the decentralized structure of Germany, the 16 states could implement the guidelines in fighting the pandemic as they saw fit. And that made it very difficult to keep the infection numbers down. This week, the CDU and SPD government brought into parliament a new emergency brake legislation, which has been passed in both chambers in the German parliament and has been signed by the president Frank-Walter Steinmeier. The law is important because it gives the federal government extra powers in regions where the infection rates are very high. It makes it possible to cut down public life, nighttime curfews are possible, and also restrictions in social interaction. And very important also that big companies are required to offer testing for their workers and employees. Whether the incompetence of the CDU health minister or the mask scandals that I talked about in the last episode of the Logbook will stick with the CDU at all remains to be seen. It is now important that Germany gets on in fighting the pandemic, and very much will depend, will Germany manage to get people vaccinated before the election enters the hot phase in the summer. One thing is for sure, the pandemic will be on people's mind. And there's one other dimension to this. People want to see a stronger role for the federal government, because during the crisis many gaps emerged. And people want the federal government to fill these gaps, be it in the healthcare system or be it in the social welfare system. People don't want to see other people being left behind by the fallout of the pandemic. And that might actually be an opening for the Social Democrats in the upcoming campaign. The earth has fever. And of course, climate change, the climate crisis, will be on people's minds when they go to the polls this summer. If Germany faces a hot and dry summer, climate will be very important, in particular for younger voters. The rise of the Green Party has been driven by the climate crisis and by the perceived inaction of the political class, so to speak. And the Green Party is very good in zeroing in on the climate-conscious voter. But they are not the only ones. The Social Democrats also make bold commitments in their party platform to fight the climate crisis. They offer technological and engineering solutions rather than bans. They want to rebuild the industrial society with a green infrastructure and a just transition for everyone. Voters who are worried about the climate might be willing to be shopping around, in particular in a year like this, where the other worries, like the pandemic, weigh heavily. The pandemic basically ended a 10-year period of growth in Germany, and over 1 million jobs are at risk in medium and small-sized companies in Germany. While the government, really under the leadership of the Social Democrats, came in and tried to soften the economic crisis and also build in measures so that jobs would not be lost, people are really worried about the long-term effects of these measures, of the debt that has been accumulated, and worry who will foot the bill at the end of the day. It will be interesting to see how voters will react to the candidate Olaf Scholz, the candidate of the SPD for the Chancellery. Because as a finance minister, he has been known for the prudent management of Germany's finances. At the same time, he has already put forward a plan who will pay the debts that have been accumulated during the pandemic, who will carry the burden, so to speak. It will be the powerful corporations and the richest part of society. At the same time, his plan offers tax benefits for households with medium and low income. 5 months before the election, we see voters are worried about the pandemic, about the climate crisis, and about the economic recovery. But in the final stretch of the election, at the end, it might all boil down to one question: who will govern Germany? And that might not really be a question of a party, but more a personal decision or a personnel decision. So all parties that will run a candidate for the Chancellery have decided. The Greens have put forward Annalena Baerbock, the CDU has put forward Armin Laschet, and the SPD has already a long time before put forward Olaf Scholz. So the race is clear. 3 candidates battle for the highest office in the German state, in the German national federal government, and the race is wide open, and we will cover it in the future, so stay tuned. And with that, I say tschüss from Washington, D.C.